To me, this is not so much about gun control as it is about what's in men's hearts. And until we come together as a nation, as a people, to heal as a people, if we don't do that and this madness continues, we will surely perish.
This has happened far too often. And I've spent a lot of time with law enforcement this past week. I'm surrounded by the best of the best every single day. And I know whenever this happens, wherever this happens, you feel it.
Well, the president and also the sheriff in East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, reacting to 3 officers killed today, 3 wounded, 1 in critical condition. Donald Trump issuing via Facebook and Twitter reaction early on, saying, "We grieve for the officers killed in Baton Rouge today. How many law enforcement and people have to die before," I think we have the full screen there, action, I believe is what he says. And then he has another tweet later on where he said that the country is a crime scene, divided crime scene. There's the first one that I read there. Let's bring in our panel of journalists, and you talk about an all-star panel. This is it. Charles Krauthammer, syndicated columnist. Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday. And Brit Hume is senior political analyst at Fox News. Brit, your thoughts about Baton Rouge and as this has developed, how it all fits in?
You talking about politically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anytime you have this kind of discord and loss of life, killings in the streets, officers being killed, that kind of disorder tends to favor the out party in a presidential election. If the candidate of the out party can appear to people to be the law and order candidate, as Donald Trump is now saying he is, that is obviously a help. The question for Donald Trump is, when people look at Donald Trump and watch him in action, do they think there's a safe candidate? Or do they look at him and say, I don't know, he's a little unpredictable, and so that's the challenge for him and the opportunity for him.
We didn't hear from Hillary Clinton for a while. Chris and her campaign put out a statement essentially saying what the president said, expressing condolences. Your thoughts on the fallout here?
I want to go back to San Bernardino in December. December 2nd, the terror attack in San Bernardino. 6 days later, Donald Trump called for the ban on Muslims coming into this country and said, until we know what the hell is going on. And as we all learned today, and we're stunned to hear about yet another police shooting, I thought, what the hell is going on? So it seems to me that this really could play very, I hate to say it, obviously, we're talking the political impact of a terrible human tragedy. This could be a strong issue for Donald Trump. That we don't know what the hell's going on. I'm going to be a bulwark against that. I'm going to be strong against that. It worked, the Muslim ban. We all thought it was going to be very unpopular and a step too far. We saw in the primaries it was hugely popular in the Republican electorate. But I go exactly to what Brett said. He's got to be strong, but he's also got to be steady. And when he puts out this tweet that says that our country is a divided crime scene, it isn't. I mean, we're not in civil war. There are some terrible tragedies happening here. And quite frankly, you can get one individual with a powerful rifle and 24-hour news coverage, and it becomes a huge national story. We're not a divided crime scene, and that's the question. Can he strike the right tone of strength? I'm going to stand up. I'm going to protect the country, but also of steadiness.
Yeah. Obviously, his first tweet was about the grieving for the families, and as we've seen from many politicians today, that's the focus, the 3 families who lost the police officers, their loved ones. As we heard from our local historian, Charles, James Rosen, the last time law and order was really used was by President Nixon and in his campaign in '68.
Look, it worked for Nixon, it worked for Wallace, who sort of invented the idea. Nixon took it from him. Successfully won an election on it, but you have to give it some substance. And I think what is the political thing to do is also what is the statesmanlike thing to do that the president is not doing. Yes, he's the healer in chief. Yes, he's the one who speaks for sanity and reconciliation. But the problem is, as with terror, he treats these as one-off incidents. I think what we need to hear from the president is not something like there's no way to justify this kind of shooting. Who even thinks that? How defensive? Of course there's not. That's not even an idea. The question is, what are we going to do? I think what he could do, to give at least the police around the country a sense that their back is being covered, is to say this is no longer just one madman after another. There is something going on here. We've had assassinations of police, including the ones in New York, I think that was about a year ago, that are becoming systematic. It's becoming a national issue. I'm going to order Homeland Security and the FBI to set up the same kind of unit they have for terrorism. Not that the terrorist units have prevented every attack in the U.S., but they have prevented many. And we need to focus and to acknowledge this is a major issue. It's an epidemic. They may not be connected incidents, but there's a war on police, and we are going to set up a counter-warfare center.
But, Britt, the president did not today do what he usually does, which is go to what he really wants to get done, and that's gun control legislation.
Well,
he didn't.
That's right, and I think that the reason for the defensiveness, which Charles suggests was built into what the president was saying, is that he feels now, he recognizes now that he is vulnerable on this issue, that his early and instinctive reactions to, what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and some of these other incidents have put him in a position where a lot of people look at that and say, listen, Mr. President, if you hadn't acted the way you acted about that, you wouldn't have seemed so to enable the idea that killing police is somehow okay. Now, he never said any such thing as that, but I think that's where he feels he's got some vulnerability. And his emphasis in his reactions to these things in the past have been to say, police acted stupidly in Cambridge. His attitude, at least, perhaps more than his words on Ferguson, suggested that the president is as suspicious and angry about police in America as some of the black activists in the street are, and I think that leaves him in a vulnerable position. Guns
are an issue, even here in Ohio, here in Cleveland. The police union here in Cleveland wants to have the open carry law suspended for the convention. And the Governor Kasich, has said, I can't do that constitutionally.
I have to say, this was a surprise to me, and I suspect to a lot of us, to find out that Ohio has an open carry law. If you can have a gun, you can carry it in the street, even in a tinderbox like a national convention.
Now, we should point out the security areas, the hard zones, you're not allowed to have any weapon, but anything outside that, you would.
Right, and the head of the police union here in Cleveland said, Governor, suspend that law at least for these 4 days when we know there are going to be demonstrations. There's been violence at anti-Trump rallies, and the governor said, I can't suspend a law. But as earlier today, when Martha was doing her special, she had one of the top policemen here in Cleveland, and he said, look, we're on a tinderbox, and it isn't an anti-gun issue. He's saying if there's somebody with a gun, we want to know that that's not a law-abiding citizen. We want to know that's somebody who's breaking the law so we can focus on that person. And if there are a lot of people with guns, it just makes it harder for us to protect, as he said, the police and people as well as the delegates here at the convention.
Quickly, Charles, final word.
Look, you can make exceptions depending on the circumstance or the place for gun laws where you can suspend them. That would be reasonable. You could call back the legislature and pass an emergency measure. But this is not about gun control. It always ends up getting the Baton Rouge killings. This is a war on cops. It's been declared. There are soldiers who are not connected, but it's happened. I think the first political candidate who picks it up, says those words, and says, I'm going to establish X, I think it should be a special unit that will look into this. I think that'll be a political winner.
Thank you all very much. By the way, this is a very strange situation. The guy that is being named right now is a 29-year-old African-American man who's tied to anti-government groups from Missouri, not from Louisiana.